Okay, so I sent out a link to all of you with the Father Ricardo's talk on abortion. I hope you had a chance to watch it. If you didn't, please do. This is going to tie into it a bit. His was, again, admittedly very, very graphic in the way it is. It shows the reality of what abortion looks like, and also some of the attitudes of folks out there. Tonight we're going to talk about the dignity of the human person, and we're going to tie in abortion to that. Anyone know what happened in Washington about 10 days ago? Okay. First, the teams, you can head to your room. So, but it was on the 22nd of January, the anniversary of 1973, the Roe versus Wade decision that legalized abortion nationally. Really took it out of the states, and it was controlled by the federal government. So it's one of the most emotional and divisive issues that we have in our country today. It's one that few really want to sit down and have a rational discussion about. And that's very difficult. It divides families, it divides friends, alienates people. Some of us may see that in our own families. I know I do. It's just very difficult to have that discussion. So what we're going to go over today is combined with a video. It also could be a little bit long, but so I'll apologize in advance for that if it is. So in 1995, the then Pope John Paul II, who is now Saint John Paul II, wrote an encyclical. Now, an encyclical, for those of you who don't know, is an official document written by the Pope, sent out to the bishops. It's the highest standard of letters that the Pope will write. So it's sent to the bishops around the world, and the one that was written then focused on particularly the Catholic doctrine on moral behavior. Evangelium Vitae, it's always a Latin name for it, was the name of the document, and basically it's the gospel of life. So we're going to focus on one portion of it, which is Article 99, and that part of it is addressed to women who have had abortions. So the Pope writes, I would now like to say a special word to the women who have had an abortion. The Church is aware of the many factors that may have influenced your decision, and she does not doubt that in many cases it was a very painful and even shattering decision. The wound in your heart may not yet have healed. Certainly what happened was and remains terribly wrong, but do not give in to the discouragement and do not lose hope. Try rather to understand what happened and face it honestly. If you have not already done so, give yourself over with humility and trust to repentance. The Father of mercies is ready to give you his forgiveness and his peace and sacrament of reconciliation. You will come to understand that nothing is definitely lost, and you will also be able to ask forgiveness from your child who is now with the Lord. With the friendly and expert help and advice of other people, and as a result of your own painful experience, you can, among the most eloquent defenders, you can be among the most eloquent defenders of everyone's right to life through your commitment to life, whether by accepting the birth of other children or by welcoming and caring those who are in need of someone to be close to them. You will become promoters of a new way of looking at human life. So the main point of this is that there are so many lies being told about abortion, and that the church doesn't immediately condemn you if you had an abortion. And it may have touched someone in your family, it may have touched friends, someone may be very close to you. But the church does not condemn. So anyone heard of Norma McCorvey?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, the decision, Roe versus Wade, she was Jane Roe. And she eventually, she never had the abortion, even though she was in that initial lawsuit. And she converted to the Catholic Church after time, and then up at the time she passed away, she was a very strong right to life advocate. So there are those conversions that go on, and there is that forgiveness that's offered. Many of March. Anybody been to the March for Life in Washington? You have. So a number of women that go to it will wear T-shirts that say, "I regret my abortion." So they admit that they had this, but they're speaking out. And there are a lot of circumstances that led to that. But know that the grace is open to anyone, and that mercy is open to everyone who asks for it. The Lord wants to give it. God always loves to forgive. I do forgive, but often I have a hard time with it. And how often do we think, I could never forget that? We run across those circumstances in our lives. But unlike you and me, God loves to forgive, and He loves to welcome His children home. So Karol Wojtyła, who was John Paul II before he was elected Pope, wrote in a letter to a friend in 1968, "The fundamental crisis of modernity is degradation, indeed the pulverization of the dignity of the human person." This still goes on today, that kind of degradation. You look at all the atrocities that are going on throughout the world. Knowing that the culture we live in, it's very hard to disagree with this. So we all see what's going on. You look at everything that we went through this last year, since Roe versus Wade was struck down by the Supreme Court. Right afterwards, crisis pregnancies were under attack. They were being vandalized. And crisis pregnancies centers, unlike Planned Parenthood, get nothing from the federal government. Yet they were still targeted and vandalized. People didn't know that the ban to ban abortion everywhere, but it wasn't a ban everywhere. All it did was turn it back to the states. So the states made that decision on whether or not abortion was going to be legal there. So our governor did, this is going back 2 years, did whatever she could to make sure that abortion stayed legal in Michigan. She made sure that there was a constitutional amendment that went on the ballot to keep it legal so that it could never be changed, that law. And sad thing is that it passed by a significant margin. And then what she did, along with other pro-abortion governors, is would invite people from other states that have banned abortion to come to Michigan to have your abortion. So, is that what we want our state known for? Bring your unborn babies here, if you want to kill them. And that's what she did, and other governors like her. And we see it with politicians who claim to be devout Catholics, starting with the previous president and the former Speaker of the House, doing everything in their power to keep abortion legal. We saw this last election cycle when so much was placed on abortion and so much disinformation on it that people really didn't understand what that issue really was. So we also have had states that have passed laws that forbid hospitals from giving medical attention to a baby born alive after a botched abortion. So if mom goes in for an abortion, the baby is aborted, the baby lives through it. They're not allowed to give any medical attention to that baby by law. So that's that's what we're facing here. So in Virginia a few years ago, they tried to pass a law to allow a woman to receive an abortion even during labor. Praise God it didn't pass. But this is what the governor said that would happen to a baby in this circumstance. This is a quote. If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and family desired. Then a discussion would ensue between the physician and the mother. About what? About whether to kill the baby. That's the discussion. Just let that sink in. This was a law that a state tried to pass to allow this to happen. This is a governor. This is where we are in our culture. We're going to give birth to a child. We're going to do everything to keep it comfortable. And then we're going to have a calm, rational discussion. We're in a society where human life is simply disposable. And a baby, if it's inconvenient, whatever. So, this is a family that I know very well. The girl in the wheelchair in the middle, his name is Megan Salter. I'm going to go more into her story in a couple of weeks. But she hadn't been able to do anything for herself since birth. She doesn't talk. She needs 24-hour care. Ellen, her mother, who's on the left as you're looking at it, is now an active pro-life speaker. Mike, her dad, quit his job early in her life and started his own business so that he could work from home, so that he could make sure that he was there to take care of her. And the sad, unfortunate thing is I went to his funeral about 3 weeks ago. So when she was young, she was well known in the neighborhood. A neighbor was asking, about her, and made a comment to Ellen, why don't you just let her go and move on? Someone saying that and thinking that that's somehow compassion, not knowing anything about her or the family. Again, I'll go into more of her story in a few weeks. Anyone ever hear of her? Gianna Jensen. She was intended to die before she was born. Her mother wanted an abortion when she was 7 months pregnant, but because she was in the third trimester, what they did was they gave Gianna a bath of burning saline solution. That's how they performed the abortion. But somehow, through the grace of God, she survived that. So she was born 2 months premature, weighing about 2.5 pounds, and she spent the first couple months in the hospital. Eventually, she entered into the foster care system. She was born with something that she called a gift of cerebral palsy. And she called it that because she says it allowed me to really depend on Jesus for everything. It was also labeled, she was labeled a hopeless case, an infant who would be a ward of the state, for whom expectations of achievement were extremely low, and doctors actually predicted that she would never lift her head. She began walking when she was 3 years old and has grown into a woman who has run marathons. And this is her in the middle carrying the Olympic torch. So we hear a lot in abortion laws. Well, we have to take into account the exception of rape, which is a horrible, horrible thing to go through. I can't even imagine what that's like. So this is a picture of Rebecca Kissling with her birth mother when she was 19 years old. She was adopted shortly after her birth and grew up in Detroit. She learned from her birth mother that her father was a rapist. Now, fortunately, her mother did not choose the abortion route. She's now 55 years old and is an active pro-life speaker, an activist, and mother of 6. She was born in 1969 before Roe versus Wade was the law. Had she been aborted, not only would thousands have not heard her story, but her 6 children would never have been born. So another argument, you probably heard this, you so-called pro-lifers are really only concerned with stopping abortion. You don't care anything about the poor moms and the struggles that they go through. Well, this is one of those crisis pregnancy centers that I brought up earlier. They're located in Dearborn Heights. I know the founders very well, the Lennon Center. They do a ton for these families. They provide free pregnancy tests. They do free ultrasounds. They offer parenting classes at no charge. For dads, they have mentoring programs. For moms that are afraid of being alone, they offer that for the dads. Diapers, formula, clothing, furniture for nursery, all at no charge. And there are many centers like that. They offer adoption information, something that Planned Parenthood never does. They get no government money. They rely solely on donations and operate on shoestring budgets. Well, all of you so-called pro-lifers, all you care about are the unborn. What about the children that are already born? You don't care about them. Well, being an adoptive father and having gone through the process twice, I can tell you that for every baby that is put up for adoption, there is a loving family that is waiting to adopt. I know of a family, my previous parish, they raised their 5 kids. After they raised their kids, they began fostering kids and adopted 5 more of those kids. Multiracial, biracial. So, talk about a very huge family. But there are loving families out there that will do that. So adoption is always an option. So getting back to the really cowardly, personally opposed, when we hear that often from politicians, Catholic politicians, I'm personally opposed, but I can't force my views on someone else. We had a governor several years ago, Jennifer Granholm, who was actually a minister of Holy Communion at a neighboring parish before she was governor. And when she became governor, that was her mantra, personally opposed to abortion. But I can't force my opinion on someone else. Why are you personally opposed to it? And if you're so opposed to it, it must be something that's wrong, and why would you not live by that? So this article is from the National Catholic Register, and it addresses that. The phrase personally opposed is fraught with ambiguity and moral slackness. It seems to say and mean what is wrong for me may not be wrong for others. If a person has any moral principles, the principles apply in general, not just for him or her, but for all. If there are extenuating circumstances or exceptions, these would also apply in general. With regard to the cases like abortion, a politician would be quasi-schizophrenic and forfeit credibility if he were actually and literally to condone for others what he himself considers immoral. If a politician has moral objections to something, his obligation can best be put in the negative. He must refrain from condoning or encouraging it. For example, if a congressman is able to vote yes or no on a law promoting the type of immorality he is opposed to, he must, in conscience, vote against it. At the very least, politicians should stop using phrases like "I'm personally opposed, but" as an excuse for support of elective abortion. In gospel terminology, this is being neither hot nor cold, but lukewarm. And we know what happens when we're that. So, you've all seen, well, maybe not all, but you may have seen my daughter Allie, who helps out with the meals. And really does she's an amazing, amazing young woman. We adopted her from Russia when she was 10 and a half months old. Her birth mother had 7 pregnancies. She had 5 abortions. She gave live birth twice, and Allie was one of them. So she has 5 siblings in heaven that she never met. She actually made contact with the one sibling that she tracked her down. She's in law enforcement, so she's very good at at tracking things down. She found her through Facebook. She was living in New Jersey. They met in Pittsburgh for a weekend, and lifestyles kind of clashed. So they stay in contact a little bit, but not very close. But to know that you had those siblings that you were never going to meet. So what do we do about all this? Anyone know who your U.S. representative is in this area? And Novi?
Dingle. Debbie Dingle.
Debbie Dingle. She was from Dearborn, which is where I'm from. Her family had that seat for nearly 100 years, dating back to her husband's father, who had that Congress seat. I tried to meet with him, her husband, before he passed away, but never could set it up, so I actually had a chance to meet and had coffee with her, just to try and discuss issues. She found out she had an adopted son because she was unable to conceive. She went through all kinds of issues. So several years ago, a bill was presented on the floor of the House of Representatives to protect babies born alive after an attempted abortion. She voted against that. She voted against protecting babies, knowing what she went through, which I could not understand. And when I questioned her on it, the response was, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not going there. So I talked last week about my lunchtime conversation at the polling place. It was actually the primary election of 2016. We need to engage in this discussion. So we also hear about what about the risk of the health of the mother? This is a portrait of Saint Gianna Beretta Molla. She was an Italian Catholic pediatrician. She was pregnant back in 1961, so it was quite a while ago. In the second month of her pregnancy with her fourth child, that was her last pregnancy, she developed a fibroma on her uterus. The doctors gave her three choices to treat it. Following examination, one was abortion, one was a complete hysterectomy, one was a removal of the fibroma alone. She opted for that third option, knowing that her life could still be in danger. And she told the doctors that her baby's life was more important than her own. So on the morning of Holy Saturday in 1962, she went into the hospital where she gave birth to her fourth child, Gianna Emanuela, and that she was delivered by cesarean section. But she still continued to have severe pain, and she died a week after giving birth on the morning of Easter Saturday. And as of 2017, her daughter, Gianna Emanuela, is a doctor of geriatrics. I got an opportunity to hear her daughter talk at Our Lady of Good Counsel several years ago, telling her mom's story and sharing that. So she travels the country too, sharing that. She was beatified in 1994 and canonized as saint by John Paul II in 2004. So this portrait here, I saw it on a pilgrimage I went to at Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So the babies in there are people who had prayed for her intercession for who were either unable or having difficulty getting pregnant. So they prayed for her intercession. So the babies and children in that painting were pictures that were sent in for her canonization of the babies that were born based on her intercession. So it's an important issue, I know, when you're looking at the health of the mom. And it's a tough one to bring to discussion. So a friend of mine asked me once, what if the doctor could only save one? Again, it's a very difficult question. So I asked, if your wife had a daughter and they were on a plane that was going down and there was one parachute, who would get the parachute? What would your wife do? So the questions that we have to answer and questions that we have to address. So remember her? St. Teresa of Calcutta. She was very outspoken on abortion. She addressed the Supreme Court on that issue. I mean, she was like, anybody who's seen pictures of her, she's that tall. It was amazing, but she had tremendous presence and tremendous authority. She had an order, a religious order that was international. Something like thousands of sisters that were doing nothing but working with the poor. She walked the walk. So she could have the authority to speak on issues like this. So when she addressed the Supreme Court, she said this. She was talking initially about all of how greatness of this country, how we were founded on freedom, how we had philosophies and government policies to really take care of everyone from the poorest of the poor to the richest of the rich. There was that common bond. And no other country around the world had what we have here, with that kind of freedom and those kind of safety nets for folks. And no other country prizes liberty and human rights in the same way that we do here in America. So you look at our Declaration of Independence, where it said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I'm just going to read what she wrote in addressing the Supreme Court. A nation founded on these principles holds a sacred trust to stand as an example for the rest of the world, to climb even higher in its practical realization of ideals and human dignity, brotherhood, and mutual respect. Your constant efforts in fulfillment of that mission, far more than your size or your wealth or your military might, have made America an inspiration to mankind. It must be recognized that your model was never one of realized perfection, but of ceaseless aspiration. From the outset, for example, America denied the African slave freedom and human dignity, but in time you righted that wrong, albeit at an incalculable cost in human suffering and loss of life. Your impetus has always been toward the fuller, more embracing conception of assurance of the rights that your founding fathers recognized as an inherent and God-given. Yours has ever been inclusive, not exclusive society, and your steps, though they may have been paused or altered now and then, have been pointed in the right direction and have trod the right path. The task has always been an easy one, and each new generation has faced its own challenges and temptations, but in a uniquely courageous and inspiring way, America has kept the faith. Yet there's been one infinitely tragic and destructive departure from those American ideals in recent memory. There was a court's decision in Roe versus Wade in 1973 to exclude the unborn child from the human family. You ruled that a mother, in consultation with her doctor, has broad discretion guaranteed against infringement by the United States Constitution to choose to destroy her unborn child. Your opinion stated that you did it not to need that your opinion stated that you did not need to resolve the question of when life begins. The question is inescapable. If the right to life is an inherent, inalienable right, it must surely exist wherever life exists. No one can deny that the unborn child is a distinct being, that is human, that it is alive, and it is unjust, therefore, to deprive an unborn child of the fundamental right to life on the basis of its age, size, condition, or dependency. It was a sad infidelity to America's highest ideals when this court said that it did not matter or could not be determined when the inalienable right to life began for a child in its mother's womb. America needs no words from me to see how your decision in Roe versus Wade has deformed the great nation. The so-called right to abortion has pitted mothers against their children, women against men. It has sown violence and discord at the heart of the most intimate human relationships. It has aggravated and derogation of the father's role of an increasingly fatherless society. It has portrayed the greatest of gifts, a child, as a competitor, an intrusion, an inconvenience. It has normally accused mothers unfettered domination over their independent lives of their physically dependent sons and daughters. And in granting this unconscionable power, it has exposed many women to unjust and selfish demands from their husbands and other sexual partners. Human rights are not a privilege conferred by government. They are every being's entitlement by virtue of his humanity. The right to life does not depend and must not be declared to be contingent on the pleasure of anyone else, not even a parent or sovereign. The Constitutional Court of the Federal Republic of Germany recently ruled that the unborn child is entitled to rights of life independently of the acceptance of its mother. This is an elementary and inalienable right that emanates from the dignity of the human person. Americans may feel justly proud that Germany in 1993 was able to recognize the sanctity of human life. We must weep that our own government at present seems blind to this truth. I have no new teaching for America. I seek only to recall your faithfulness to what you once taught to the world. Your nation was founded on the proposition, very old as a moral precept, but startling and innovative as a political insight, that human life is a great and immeasurable worth, and that it deserves always and everywhere to be treated with the utmost dignity and respect. I urge the court to take the opportunity to present by the petitions in these cases and consider the fundamental question of when human life begins, and to declare without equivocation the inalienable rights which it possesses. So this little woman had the courage to stand up to the Supreme Court of the United States, the most powerful country in the world, and present this. What are we so afraid of? Now, granted, Roe versus Wade is no longer